let me continue this discussion that we started last time. And once again, I just want to always begin with understanding what's happening in the steps here. That what we're really doing is building up a charge of energy in one step. And then the next step helps us discharge and recharge. So that pattern is going through all of the steps. It starts out charge, discharge, then we recharge, discharge, recharge, discharge, and that works its way through all 12 steps. Because there's a very, very powerful force that is being generated in our lives as we work the steps sequentially. And so I just want to emphasize the importance of working the steps in order. There is a very, very specific effect that happens when we work them in order. And as you see, as we've been going through the steps, how that energy is building in one step and then being discharged in the next step. And so in step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. We really were making a commitment to a new way of life, is the way I like to think about it. And it was a very important commitment because the other way that we were living didn't work, right? And what we say is the consciousness that is creating a problem cannot solve it, that we have to open up our consciousness to some new possibilities. And that's what we did in step 3. We committed to now, in the way I like to think about it, is to recover our lost true self, is to recover our ability to really learn how to deal with life on life's terms. That's what we've never known how to do because of all of the nonsense ideas that we get as we're developing, or as Don Miguel Ruiz calls it, he calls it our domestication. Through our domestication, we get all of these crazy ideas about how life is supposed to be, how we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do. And all of these shoulds and supposed tos dominate our life. In fact, some psychotherapist, Dr. Karen Horney, calls it the tyranny of the shoulds. That's what runs our life. So what we've done now is that we've come after step 3, made a commitment to really discover a new way of being in this world, to discover some new possibilities. And that's how I define recovery. It's a discovery of new possibilities. So once again, we had hope in step 2 that there could be a new possibility for us, that we could be restored to sanity or restored to our, what I call, to our natural condition, our true self, right? And then step 3, we make a commitment to do that. Now step 4 is the first time that we have to, there's tangible evidence in our commitment, because now we are asked to go into action. We are asked to make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And I emphasized last time, and that video is available now, and it's on the YouTube channel, and Patrick has already posted the link to that, is you can go back and hear the discussion of what makes fearless so important. Because we're really opposing our false self and what our false self is demanding from us, demanding how we should be. But now today, I want to focus on the other part. I made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So, you can think of moral as an ethical thing, but I really want to focus on moral just being the difference between right and wrong. And what makes something right and what makes something wrong? Well, I like to think about right and wrong as toxic or nourishing. If something's wrong for me, I think of it as being toxic for me. It does not promote my growth. It does not promote healthy relationships, a healthy way of showing up in the world. It does not promote the ability to digest experiences and to grow from them. So if something's toxic, it's actually subtracting and acting against my true self, my true nature. If something's right, then it means I start to thrive. I start to grow. I start to become what I can be, as Bill calls it. And that's the kind of inventory that I think is important to look at, is what about our behavior has been toxic? How have we been toxic to ourselves? How have we been toxic to those people that we care about and love? And how have we been toxic, like I said, to our relationship with ourselves, to how we look at problems? Do our attitudes fall into, this toxic category? Do I have this attitude that if I have a problem, it means that I'm less than? That somehow admitting that I'm wrong is subtracting from who I really am? Is that the idea I had? Well, that was true for me when I first came into program. My God, I was ashamed that I wasn't perfect. And I thought if I, showed you my faults and I owned any of them, then how could you, love me and accept me? How could I belong? And so I had all of these ridiculous ideas in terms of how I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to treat you. And none of them had anything to do with respecting you. It all had to do with me imposing my ideas on you, and your job was to go along with it. There wasn't room in my consciousness for you. That was toxic, by the way. That if my awareness does not include an awareness of you, then I'm one-sided. I'm self-centered. So when we look at the inventory, like I did when I took my inventory, back, in the first year of my recovery back in 1971, I kept, going through and looking at the fourth column, right, is what was my part in all this stuff. And what kept showing up was self. Self kept showing up. And I thought, my God, I look at selfishness, self-centeredness. That is the root of my problems. But I didn't understand what put self in that column all the time. And today I understand it. It was my emotional dependency. You see, I had to demand that things would go my way because that's the only way I could imagine that I could be okay. I had to demand that life acted the way it was supposed to be because that's where I thought I would find my happiness and my serenity. I had to live up to a certain expectation in my mind for me to be okay. And so this self-focus, this self-centeredness was based on this idea that I had to impose my ideas, my rules, my concept of what life was supposed to be like on life and try to control it in order for me to be okay. Bill called that an impossible way of life. I just thought you had to try harder. I mean, I couldn't conclude it was impossible for me. For me, the issue was, my God, if the square peg's not fitting in that round hole, I got to get a bigger hammer. Where's the sledgehammer? Give me the sledgehammer. Maybe that'll get that square peg in the round hole. Never thinking that the way I'm approaching this whole thing is ass backwards. He called it putting the cart before the horse. That's what Bill says in the letter. If you go back and read that letter that Bill wrote back in 1956, that was actually published in the 1958 Grapevine, is one of the things that he realized was that he had the cart before the horse his whole life. So now when I go back and I start to do an inventory from that perspective, it starts to look really different. Now, if I sit down and write down a resentment, I need to start paying attention to what is the unenforceable rule that person didn't cooperate and that I resent them for. What was my demand on them? And what was my unhealthy dependence that imposed that demand on that other person? If I use sex for validation of myself, then I'm not having sex to enjoy my partner. I'm trying to get them to stamp my self-esteem card. Well, that's not a healthy attitude. That's not how you have a healthy relationship. It all becomes about validation, not about being with someone and enjoying that other person and who they are. Becomes driven, right? God, how, what's the first thing that I would say after sex? Did you enjoy that? Please tell me I'm a good boy. I mean, come on now. I wasn't interested in having sex with you. I was interested in getting an A on my report card. Can't have a healthy relationship if that's going on all the time. So that's all of the nonsense that I brought into my life. And that's what our inventory has to start to uncover. That's what our inventory has to look like if we're going to achieve emotional sobriety. We have to be able to see how our emotional dependency has manifested itself in these toxic rules and demands and claims on people, places, and things. That's what we need to be able to do. And so in many ways, this is going to be a call for you all to do a new inventory, right? Because none of us did an inventory based on that. My sponsor couldn't give me that direction because this stuff hadn't, sorted out yet at that particular point in time. But that's what we're going to do. We're introducing that idea to you tonight. There is going to be a link posted. Once again, Tom, could you put the whole HTTP thing in so everybody can download this form so you have it handy for next week? It's called the Emotional Sobriety Inventory Form. It was revised and somebody is already holding it up. Rachel's got it. If you look at Rachel's little box, you can see it. Please pull that up for next week. We are going to I'm going to invite you to inventory something that upset you. And so we're going to actually work this inventory so you can start to develop this skill in your life, because you're going to see that this becomes a very important part of achieving emotional sobriety. I have to be able to become aware of my emotional dependence and how it is manifesting itself in my attitudes, in my behavior, in my demands, and when I'm upset and when I'm disturbed about a situation. So that is what we're going to be doing next time. Today, I just wanted to introduce this concept for you and invite you to come and with your inventory form next week. And so we can do one and talk about it together. So with that being said, I will turn this over to my esteemed colleague and friend and co-podcaster and
amen, brother. Testify. Boy, yes. when Alan gets going on the steps, I feel like I'm in church, man. It's like I've got my hands up in the air. I'm feeling good. It's like I want to play that song from the movie Leap of Faith. Are you ready for a miracle? we just get that and play that. I love it. It's like, I always take notes when you talk, and I want to get this part. I want to just a clarification. The cart comes after the horse.
Well, it depends on what state you're from.
Oh,
we're not supposed to.
I'm in rural Tennessee, so don't worry about it. I got that one.
I'm the guy that would stick the cart in front of the horse.
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to try something different, right? And then I do that for a couple of years, and then realize that this may not be a good idea.
That's good.
In fact, it probably took a lot longer than a couple of years.
For a little while. It's like I'm gonna take a little bit different slant on this as we come in here and talk about introspection. As how our introspection changes in step 4. But before I do that, I was like I prepare for everything on YouTube. I was listening to Russell Brand, the comedian, actor, recovering guy, talk about step 4, and I want to read his version of step 4 just to start with. He says, write down all the things that are fucking you up or have ever fucked you up. Don't leave anything out. That's step 4 according to Russell Brand. I can't say it with that great English accent of his though. It's so much better when he does it. But it is that, and it's in the very last part in the 12 and 12, the very last paragraph, I think it is that it just talk. Well, let me see. I had it a second ago. Yeah. Therefore, thoroughness ought to be the watchword when we're taking inventory. It talks about thoroughness, and it also talks about the wisdom of writing these things down. And it's like, oh, that's another thing that Russell Brand said. This, like, the first thing he said about it is step 4 is where it gets a bit admin heavy. So you actually have to go to work. We talked about that a little bit last time, where it's like, this is where I think it's the very first step of emotional sobriety. It's like, this is where we step all the way into this. And this, and for the, when I think of this in terms of the work that I've done, not only as a recovering person, but as a therapist, this is where the whole realm of what I call intrapersonal dynamics come up. This is about the, when Alan was saying, like, we're opposing our false self in this place. So one of the things that I immediately thought about when you said that, Alan, is if we're opposing our false self, it brings up this wonderful question, which is, who is opposing our false self? Okay. And so now we go to now we get into the question of, who am I? Who is the I in here? And it's like, and we really have to begin the process of opening up to the possibility of being on our own side. And for most of us, but we all have our different stories, and we come at it from different ways. It's like the Alan talks about, needing to just hammer things in and make them work the way he wants to work. I when he talks about that stuff, I kind of go back and realize that when I was at my worst, it's like I was much more of a defeatist. It's like I had given up. I assumed that I was wrong. It was, I had, we probably talked about it here before. I've later described it as negative arrogance. I am the piece of shit the world revolves around. I'm the piece of shit the world revolves around. Everything's about me, but it's not in a good way at all. It's like I am beyond that. And my anger and my frustration and all that stuff is, even though I have plenty of it for other people that are going to come out in the inventory, it's mostly right at me. It's like, I'm attacking me. So we need somebody on our own side. Now, this goes back to what we talked about last time also, that this is why we need another person. This is where, whether that be a therapist or a sponsor or something, it's like we need another human being to work, to be with us for this thing, because walking through this fourth step on our own is, that's just a predictable shit show. It's like especially the first time around, because you're going to be anything but on your own side, is the way I think about it. Because that sponsor, that person who is going to represent the voice that's going with you in this, is really going to be, now go back to the intrapersonal landscape, the relationships within ourselves. If that person is going to be, a lot of times for many of us, the first role model we have for what I call a recovery self. It's like we're already working on separating ourselves from our addiction. We're already working on saying, I have an addiction, I'm not an addiction. I have alcoholism, I'm not alcoholism. And what I teach people is, because we can't get rid of alcoholism, what we do is we learn to see it, hear it, and disagree with it and disobey it. So we're separating from that, but we're still powerless in the face of alcoholism. So we go back, so I'm drifting back to the first step for a moment, but still, because even today, all these years later, in recovery, without a support system, without my practice of recovery, sooner or later, alcoholism wins, is what I believe. And I don't mean that as a defeatist thing. It's my motivation for working my program and having my daily practice of recovery. It's like, none of us can do this alone. We need each other. It's like, we don't have to be there all the time. We are, I think recovery becomes, beginning at this point with the fourth step, recovery begins to be this rechargeable battery, so that over time we can actually go away from meetings for a little bit. Between meetings, I could hold a charge. Why do we say 90 and 90 to start with? Is because what happens when you get a battery that's new and you need to charge it, you plug it in, you leave it plugged in. That's what we do. So, but none of us could hold our charge forever, indefinitely, and that kind of arrogance can get us in trouble. So, anyway, back to the thing I'm saying about the other person, that sponsor. That sponsor becomes, how many times have we think about different stories, think about your own story, about how you get surprised by how how your sponsor responds as you're talking this stuff through. Not to mention when you get to step 5, when you tell another human being these things about yourself that you assume is going to send them flying away from you, and they just sit there and look understanding, and you tell them something and they say, oh yeah, I did that 4 times 3 years ago, and there's just that sense of what I say is in AA, one of the coolest things is what you'll never get two particular responses. You'll never get somebody who basically, just shrugs something off and doesn't give a shit. But you will also never get the response when you tell something about yourself that they go, oh my God, you didn't, never get that. It's like everybody looks at you because somebody else in that room has done that. I remember being in Austin, Texas, and the meeting where a guy used, he actually was a speaker meeting, and he used the phrase, the first time I killed a guy. And it's like, I later kind of figured he was going for effect there a little bit, but he got it. It's like, it's the first time I killed a guy. And so we got that. But I want to cover a couple of points to wrap this up. So we're talking about if we're going to oppose our false self, if we're going to inventory something, and if we're going to do that, we're going to need to be on our own side. And that's, it's like, because otherwise we've already been doing inventorying and not being on our own side, beating the holy crap out of ourselves on a daily basis. Most of us have been doing that. We need to be able to do that to somebody that can hold us up, somebody that can say, no, we're not going to let you off the hook. This is also, by the way, one of the things I think is a key to a good marriage. We're not going to let you off any hook. You're going to be responsible for what you're responsible for, but we're not going to condemn you. We are not here to condemn you, and we're going to help you discover that that basically that negative arrogance, and you are the piece of shit the world revolves around, is that to whatever degree at times I've been a piece of shit in my life, the world does not revolve around me, and just because I think I'm a bad person, or just because I hate myself, doesn't make that so either, any more than thinking I'm a wonderful, great guy. So the idea here is, I think the 4th step is the place where we start emotional sobriety. I think it's the place where we actually can begin to consider the fact that there's going to be a developing recovery voice inside of us. A voice that is going to be a voice of wisdom, a voice that basically is going to be learning from our sponsors, from our groups, all the stuff you soak in all around you. At first, it's going to be them. It's like we don't trust ourselves. So it's what they said, or what this person said, or my therapist said, whatever that is. But eventually, what ends up happening is that battery begins to get charged, and we begin to have this part of ourselves that's actually on our own side. And I really, I believe that begins in the 4th step. I'm glad I landed on 4 when Mary and I got split up into our 2 teams. So that's what I have to say about that. Thank you.
Now I can go amen to that.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. You got that Texan in you. I can see that Texan in you.
You bet. Yes, Texas.
You want Tom to be at the Alamo with you if you're at the Alamo. I'd want Tom to be on Park.
I would advise you not to be at the Alamo. If you're time traveling, don't go to the Alamo, okay?
That might not be the best place to go.
Speaking about self-defeating, yeah.
That's right. But I could die a hero. That's
true. At least I can meet Davy Crockett. Yeah,
that's right. Listen, those guys were always my heroes.
Mm-hmm.
But look, what you said was so important, because that is the emerging consciousness that begins. And I just love how you brought that part of the discussion in. That if you're wondering, when I say true self, you can think of it as our healthy self, right?
Yeah.
It is the part of us that wants us to be what we can be. It's the same part of us that, we weren't, satisfied with just laying around and crawling. We wanted to walk. I mean, that no one had to tell us that. Your parents didn't have to say, okay, Craig, you've been crawling around this house long enough. Get up on your feet and start walking. You just want to do it. A kid wants to do it because of that force inside of them that moves them towards being what they can be. You have that force in you. I have that force in you. We interfered with that force when we started to try to become something that we weren't. Now we turn that force. This kind of force is kind of like Miracle Grow. If you put it on weeds, it's going to grow the hell out of weeds. So I was the best alcoholic I could be. I mean, half measures availed me nothing, right? And I was the best false self I could be. I mean, I was going to try to become that, as ridiculous as it was, because that force, whatever we put it on, is just going to grow. That's what Miracle Grow does. And now, like you said, and I love how you said, this is really the beginning of the journey into emotional sobriety.
I think so.
And I think that that's very well stated.